guys. Yeah, Twisted Sister is appropriate for this session today. Let me just adjust myself here because I'm not looking the clearest, although I'm in the corner of the screen anyway. I've got this whole thing going on. For some reason in Swansea in summer we've got sunshine. It's just unprecedented. For those of you who are not from Swansea, you're soon going to understand what I mean when I say it's unprecedented when you see how miserable the weather is here 24/7, 365 days a year. This is part 2 of week 1's lecture, and I'm just going to give a brief overview of what you're studying. Right, you've signed up to do a media studies degree, so we're going to go briefly through what is media. This is going to be a lecture filled with passive aggressive rage, and I just want you guys to know that that is my default position in life. Passive aggressive, sort of uncontrolled, unmanageable rage. That's me. So this is kind of normal, okay? When you get to meet me person to person, when we do seminars, when we do study groups, etc., and eventually when the world returns to some semblance of normality and we actually start doing face-to-face teaching and so on, you'll come to understand that this is my default position. But within that, I'm a really nice guy too. So, you know, I'm like Libra, right? I'm balanced. Okay. So, fundamental question that we need to begin with is, what are media? And really, media refers to anything situated between a subject and an object. So an object is the message being sent, and a subject the receiver of the message. Something which sits in between those two things is a medium or constitutes media. Now, we traditionally think of these things in terms of television, internet, radio, magazines, newspapers, etc., etc. But if you actually conceptualize media in those terms, then media is much wider than any of those things. For example, I consider a light bulb to be a medium. There is a message being sent, light, and the light bulb sits between me and the message, for example. And that medium has transformed the world. The medium of the light bulb itself has transformed the way that we exist and we live as people. Before the light bulb, you couldn't do work at night because you had candles and stuff like that, and wax, and it was a mess, and you had oil lamps, and it smelt, and there was fumes, and you were dying, and you know there was respiratory illness, and children were stunted, and it was a whole thing. And the light bulb comes along. I can work at night now, which is what I frequently do because I spent most of my day sort of messing around, not doing much, and then all my work is left to the night. Thanks a lot, light bulb. Medium, for our purposes, is a means of communication of some kind of message. But we can also conceptualize the media in terms of different enterprises. We're familiar with the idea of different media companies. For example, I'm sort of a social media theorist and a digital media theorist, therefore my interest in terms of companies tends to be around the big four: Apple, Facebook, Google, Amazon. But there are traditional media industries, you know, BBC, etc., film industry, blah 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 blah, wow, newspaper industry, you know what I'm talking about. Social institutions. Media constitute different types of social institutions at different levels. It could be a social institution itself, as in an institution of a certain kind, or the practices of using media can become social institutions in themselves as well. We all watch the same television program, we all do this, we all do that, we all go on Facebook, we all go on Instagram, we all go on Snapchat, blah 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 blah. Media also is very important in terms of the cultural establishment. You know, look at our country at the moment. Who is the Prime Minister? A failed former journalist. Several members of his cabinet are failed journalists, and those failed journalists are supported by the newspapers that employed them. A cultural institution formed around the practices of really bad right-wing journalism. We can also describe the media in terms of the fourth estate or propaganda. You know, a part of society, if we're talking about the fourth estate, whose job it is to hold power to account and hold truth to power in some ways, but fails miserably at that usually because there are political interests and media ownership is extremely important, and therefore it becomes an arm of propaganda of the state. So in all, media is a flexible term. Someone like me will use media to describe mediums, but we also use it as an umbrella term to describe all sorts of other aspects of the media, this wider thing. So let's have some definitions here. What are media? Technologies that communicate messages to audiences in different parts of a region. Interesting use of the word region. Not objects themselves, but means of communications. These can be positive or negative, or tools of propaganda or democratic sources of truth. Excuse me, I'm drinking tea. So, what is Lohi trying to say here? Well, media constitute particular methods, technological in nature, that distribute messages between people in different regions. And he uses the term region really specifically here because region is undefined. He's not talking about region as in Southwest Wales. Region could be globe, it could be country, it could be town, it could be village, it could be street, for example. So region is chosen in that way to describe how the scale of media can change. So why do we study the media? Now this is the most fundamental thing. You may ask yourself at this point in time, why have I decided to do this degree? Why have I committed 3 years of my life to a media degree? Why have I signed myself up to an advance of £40,000 worth of debt when I graduate to pursue a media degree? And now I've got to sell media to you. And I'm not a natural salesperson, right? I mean, look at me. And, I don't like no. Let me tell you, my friends, this is why you should study a media degree. This is why everyone should have to do media at some point. And this is why our country, and indeed the Western Hemisphere in terms of democracy, is crippled because we do not make people do media. Media is absolutely fundamental to everything. You're going to get jerks at university who, I don't know, are studying physics or engineering, because we don't have enough engineers, right? Or law or something ridiculous like that, okay? And they're all going to be like, media, that's not even a real degree, we use like tools and stuff. And yeah, you are a tool, pal. Their very construction of media being a hopeless degree is a media construction itself. It is a particular right-wing position that is broadcast through media channels to imbeciles. And you may ask yourself, well, why would the media broadcast things that says media is bad? They're not saying media is bad, they're saying studying the media is bad. Because if you have a population which doesn't understand how the media manipulates, how the media controls, how the media shapes our reality itself, then what you have is a stupid population who are easily to be controlled. Now, it's no surprise to me that this government that's been in power for the last 10 years, and indeed governments in the US and other parts of the Western world, are mad keen on kids not doing humanities subjects. They're mad keen on kids doing like STEM subjects, physics, chemistry, maths, engineering, computer science. You think, well, why are they mad keen on that, Leighton? You've got me down the rabbit hole now. I feel like Alice, And the reason why they're mad keen on doing that is because those things don't teach you critical thinking skills. So you are pliant if you're doing those things in order to be manipulated by the mass media and social media and all aspects of the media. You guys are engaging in a course of study which allows you to deconstruct and understand the techniques used by the media to control societies. You are weapons at that point. What you are doing at a fundamental level is studying for 3 years the techniques that are used to construct our reality itself. Media is what we engage with to understand the world. Media, therefore, is our reality. Our reality is media. We study the media to understand how reality itself, as we perceive it and as we understand it, is constructed. Therefore, the most important degree offered by Swansea University is this one. The most important degree that you could possibly study is this one, and we're awesome. I've been telling people that for years. They don't listen. If anyone, any sort of dumbass comes up to you and says, "Oh, media, that's a degree for and you, okay, there's two things that you've got to do. You can take either option. Okay, now I'm a pacifist, right? So I take the option of engaging them in critical debate and destroying their worldview completely until they adopt the fetal position and start crying for their mother. Your other option is just to smack them in the face. Now, but as I said, I'm a pacifist and I don't endorse such things. But you know, it's up to you. You might think, okay, so this is just the rantings of one clearly deranged individual talking into his computer while he's recording a lecture for first years. And of course, to an extent, you're correct, right? But I'm not the only person that thinks this. So Roger Silverstone, a very, very important media theorist. We cannot evade media presence or media representation. We have come to depend on our media, both printed and electronic, for pleasures and information, for comfort and security, for some sense of the continuities of experience. It is because the media are central to our everyday lives that we must study them. And Silverstone didn't go far enough as far as I'm concerned. Yes, media are central to our everyday lives, but they actually constitute our everyday lives. What we do is media, how we understand the world. How do I understand the world? I go on Twitter, I go on Instagram, I try not to go on Facebook too much because baby pics and I'm not having that. I go online and, you know, I go into dank sort of areas of Reddit and understand the world through that way. This is how we understand the world itself. So Roger Silverstone is actually spot on, but he doesn't go far enough. This isn't a new position. As far as I'm concerned, the first media theorist was Plato when discussing the allegory of the cave in the Republic. In the allegory, Plato used the example of prisoners chained in a cave who can only see shadows cast on the walls. The prisoners accept the shadows of puppets in the cave as reality, not the representations of reality from the puppet showman. Now, you might think, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, Plato? I didn't sign up to no philosophy degree. Shut up. And I'm like, you should have done a bit of research on media studies, because media studies is an offshoot of philosophy and many other subjects, including sociology. But let me talk you through it. So, looking on this diagram here, you have some prisoners there in the middle, and there's shadow, and you can see, it's not a great picture, I'm afraid, but you can see shadows cast on the wall in front of them, where it says on the picture, shadows cast on this wall. You have a fire behind way, a roadway with puppet showmen perform diffuse sunlight and ascent to sunlight. Now, in this scenario, what Plato proposes in the Republic is that those prisoners who've been kept in these conditions for all their life will accept the shadows cast on this wall as reality itself. They have no way out of this. They don't see anything else. This is their world. Therefore, this medium of shadow puppetry is reality to these poor, unfortunate prisoners. Let's extend Plato's allegory a little bit and think about what he's trying to say about human beings and media at that point. Our lives are diffused with media. We do not escape media. Every second of our day is consumed by consumption of media of some kind. We're always on our phones. We're always listening to something. We're always doing something. We're always reading something, etc., etc. Even when we're not, we're talking about it. Therefore, we are in a cave, and reality is what is given to us through our screens. This is what Plato was saying many, many hundreds of years ago. The significance of the cave for us is Plato's point with the analogy is the prisoners are mistaken in believing the shadows are real and that the world is like the reality they accept from the shadows. For the prisoners, the mediation of reality in the cave has become real. And that's such an important word that I underlined it. Mediation. And this is akin to our relationship with the media. Now, arguably more than ever, the media creates our reality through representing the real. It mediates the real. But the mediation of reality is never real in itself. Mediation is affected by all sorts of issues, including politics, capital, race, gender, religion, etc., class. Okay, so your work for this week, for the seminar this week, is to read a short piece that I've put up on Canvas about the cave analogy, and what we'll do is we'll talk through this and try to understand in greater depth what this term mediation is. But let me hold you in no doubt, my friends. Your degree is the study of the process of mediation. Really, in all aspects, even if you're doing production modules, you're doing journalism modules, you're looking at film modules, what you're looking at always is techniques of mediation. How the real is replaced by the mediated, and what our relationship to the mediated means. That is really the core of your degree. If you want me to say, what is a media studies degree all about? There is a one-word answer: mediation. How reality is transformed through the process of mediation. There is a one-word answer. If you hand in an essay with that one-word answer on it, I will either murder you or murder myself. I'm not sure yet, but it's open to debate. But one of the two of us is going to go down. The process of understanding media as mediation leads to all these classic stinkers, and these are the sort of things that we're going to discuss, right? What kinds of films get made in the Hollywood system and why? You know, I'm going to talk about this when we talk about the Frankfurt School in a few weeks' time, but I don't watch chick flicks, okay? Because I've seen some chick flicks, and that means I've seen them all. Now, I don't watch Star Wars anymore because I saw Star Wars when I was a kid, and they're exactly the same. I don't watch the Marvel movies, even though when I was a kid I was a big comic book fan. I was also a big rugby player as well. Hey, people give me contradictions, right? But what kinds of films get made in the Hollywood system is an economic decision. So Hollywood mediates the world for economic principles, i.e. what will make money. Okay? This is a critical question. Who owns the media and what effects does media ownership have? These are critical questions because that tells us how the world is mediated. Does technology alter our consciousness of the world? Short answer, yes. And how does it do it? Because technology mediates the world in particular ways, which makes us pay attention to some things and makes us take attention away from other things. Mediation again. Does media violence make children violent? Interestingly enough, no. There's no evidence really to suggest that, but it's a fundamental question because it does lead us into this idea of how does mediation affect behavior? What sort of relationship is it between celebrities and fans? How's human relationships mediated by media, and etc., etc. Now, all these sort of questions, which I'm sure you're going to be interested in, I'm sure you're going to answer, along with the myriad other questions which are involved in a media studies degree, are all contingent upon understanding theory. You cannot, my friends, I mean, I talked about reading in the last session, right? And okay, I'll extend that idea of what reading actually means in terms of the context of your degree now. You cannot get by in any degree, really, without understanding the theory which underpins a subject. So this is the reason why I've chosen William Merrin's piece for your summary exercise, because William does a really good job of condensing down and giving a very sweeping but very good and detailed overview of media theory through the ages in that chapter that I've asked you to read. Theory is critically important in your degree. You will be asked to read, understand, and use different theories throughout your degree, and you'll be, you know, this is normal for a humanities degree, it's normal in many different academic disciplines, but it is important to stress that you will need to do this. The purpose of any theory is to explain, comprehend and interpret phenomena and put forward propositions suggesting why such phenomena occur in the manner they do. So theory is therefore easy, right? You know, a theory is there to explain comprehend and interpret something that occurs. Theory itself is a systematic way of thinking about mass communications historically in media studies. Intelligent questions are the foundations for intelligent theory, according to Lougheed. I don't dispute that for 1 second. Now, as you might remember, when I introduced myself in the first lecture, I'm a media theorist. It's my job not to make up theory. I don't just like, oh yeah, but I do research and then I propose theoretical positions based on the research that I do. Okay, so I look, for example, at how people use virtual reality. This summer I've been doing some work on the nature of immersion in virtual reality, and I've been looking at different levels of immersion. I've been looking at how people engage with different types of virtual reality experience, and then proposing a tripartite model of immersion within virtual reality, which is contingent on the player being drawn into the experience, including their predisposition towards the experience itself. Okay, that's probably all meaningless to you right now, and don't worry about it, it's not part of this module. But what I'm saying here is that media moves forward via theory. So what I want to briefly do here is just skip very quickly through some of the theories that we use in media studies. Now, media studies itself, please excuse me a second while I drink some more tea. Downed it. Now, communication studies itself is really the American branch of media studies. And it predates media studies in the UK. So in America, all human communication studies draw on traditions such as Greek and Roman rhetoric and thought. You can see why I used Plato just now. And sort of European Middle Ages, Renaissance trivium of education, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. Really, communication studies therefore emerges out of critical linguistics and areas like that. So the pragmatist tradition in the 1870s in the US, people like Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, Chauncey Wright, really were concentrating on how meaning is constructed by different mediums. And this is really the first instance of having a theory of media and an area committed to the understanding of what the media was doing. It's no surprise it emerges around the 1870s. Newspapers are very important at that time. We're pre the emergence of electronic media at a mass level, although there is electronic media emerging. The telegraph exists and the telephone will exist very shortly afterwards. But it's before the radio, it's before television, etc. This emphasis on construction of meaning is really, if you were studying in the US and doing a communications degree, this is what you'd be concentrating on. Now, media studies, as we study it by and large across the entirety of this country, is different to this. We are interested in how the construction of meaning is, because if you go back like literally 10 minutes from now in this video, you will see that I was kind of banging my fists on the table about it. But not necessarily just in the narrow sort of way that communication studies as it begun was interested. Really important intervention into communications as an empirical discipline is Claude Shannon's model, where Shannon, looking specifically in the post-World War II world at cybernetics and cybernetic theory and how communication can be extrapolated from the human experience to understand any types of communications between things. This is a critical theory in the history of communication studies with regards to computers, for example. But as an empirical discipline, what Shannon looks at, the general communication system model, is messages being sent as signals, being received, and then being uncoded. And this kind of linear model of communication became, following on from the pragmatist tradition, became another step towards what we understand as media studies. So Schramm adapts this in some ways, so this into two different sort of fields of experience, encoders and decoders. This would become the foundational basis for Stuart Hall's work later. On the side of these sort of more technical models of media, we also have a different aspect of media theory. In terms of critical theory itself. And what we mean by critical theory, and it's a term you all need to get used to, critical theory developed with the Frankfurt School and associated with Adorno and Marxist critique. Critical theory is the idea that, you know, we take critical positions towards phenomena in the world. We don't just describe, but we apply theory to unpick and critique those phenomena in the world. In the post-war world, film studies and the interpretation of film as an art form is an example of critical theory. We don't just look at film in terms of its technical production or its economic value. We look at how messages and meanings are communicated in terms of their politics, in terms of their, you know, ideas on gender or race or so on, and that becomes the foundational basis for film studies as we understand it now. So critical theory in itself is not limited to the technical or the economic, for example. It is social, it is political, etc. In the 1950s, alongside critical theory, to the development of medium theory through a gang of Canadians, really. Harold Innis, Eric Havelock, Marshall McLuhan, the Toronto School, and in 1955 got Lazarsfeld and Katz, the notion of personal influence and the intermediary role of opinion leaders. That becomes an important aspect of how media theory develops as well. We look at how media is not just talking to people in terms of blank slates, but how different people within the media influence in different ways. You might think, I'm skipping through this really quickly. Don't worry, I've got it all in hand. You know all them lectures that are coming up after this? It's going to be covered in depth. Into the 70s, we have culturalism as a media theory development, most closely associated with a Welsh theorist called Raymond Williams, which looks at media as an expression of life, and therefore you can integrate things like feminist theories, and the Centre for Contemporary Cultural Studies in Birmingham was very, very important, founded by Richard Hogarth to study cultural studies itself. Most important theorist for me, Stuart Hall, who I'll talk about later in the module. And in the 1990s, new media and the question of disciplinary legitimacy, and I will come to that also. So really, through all these developments over time, we have a theoretical maturity in media. The focus on mass communications really was key to establishing a theoretical maturity. Broadly socio-cultural perspective, concern with the social impact of media forms and use of quantitative and qualitative methods to study those effects, concern with cultural texts and their context and representation, and a central focus on content and reception. That central focus on content and reception runs through the subject, basically. We have different types of theories. You have normative theories concerned with examining and prescribing how media ought to work, empirical theories concerned with facts, and critical theories which question the role and impact of media. Sorry, there was just a really loud motorbike going past outside. It sounded like either it was a really loud motorbike or somebody was riding a hairdryer. Now, if he comes back again, I'm going to get up, go out of my front door, put a piano wire across the road and decapitate him. Sorry. Critical theories questioning the role and impact of media, such as Adorno and the Frankfurt School. And we're going to cover different types of these all the way through this module. Okay, that brings me to the end of what I want to talk about in this very short video. Well, not that short, it's half an hour, right? Why study the media? Let's go back to this fundamental question. Why study the media? Because media is everything. Media is reality. It's the most fundamental subject. It includes philosophy, critical theory, critical research, deals with the nature of reality. It's political, it's social, it's economic, and it's behavioral. And if anyone tells you media is a waste of time, send them to me. And I was lying about that pacifist thing. Okay, I will be back like whenever you watch the next video, really, innit? You know, time is kind of meaningless in this vacuum of COVID. So, you know, I will be back whenever you put the next video on. See you guys.